we have also questions from the community.
Cool.
Yeah. So first of all, were you always into fitness, like from the very childhood? What kinds of sport have you done?
So I was mostly just a dancer in school. Like in high school, my sport was dancing. I never really played sports. But in saying that, I was a very active person. My family was super active. And during the summers, we would spend the days out behind the boat skiing or wakeboarding or whatever. And then winters, we would spend skiing in the mountains. So we were just active in general, very outdoorsy. Both of my parents were total gym bunnies. And, not that they ever did anything with that. They only ever trained to be healthy and fit. But one of my earliest memories is being in the childcare or the creche at the gym in New Zealand where I grew up. So like I've spent a lot of time in gyms. And then I did a couple of years of gymnastics. I did a couple of years of judo, and then got into dance. And that was kind of the thing that I really loved. And then I actually went to university to study dance. And it kind of led me on this path where I ended up doing some travel for an exchange with my university. I had an accident skiing one year and I couldn't dance. And it just kind of long story short, I found my way into a gym doing rehab and the prehab required for this knee reconstruction that I needed. And so I started to get more and more into fitness. And I'd been doing a little bit of personal training prior to that, but I stepped it up a notch when I had to recover from this injury and eventually found CrossFit. And I guess, as they say, the rest is history. I started with a month trial and then wasn't sure if I was going to keep going and got sucked in and committed to a 6-month membership. And, the owner of the gym gave me a special deal that I was like, okay, fine. And I think it took about 3 months for me to like get into it and start seeing some, I guess, I had to take 3 months to just understand the language because, I remember being like, what's a snatch? What's a clean and jerk? And just learning all the words. Yeah. And then I reckon another 3 months after that, I started to get things like kipping pull-ups, and I could do some of the gymnastics and I was getting stronger. You just get stronger so quickly early on. So it was really rewarding. And that was when I was all in at that point. I was a full CrossFitter, like converted.
Like you never mentioned you were a dancer, I think.
Yeah.
Wow, this is the huge fact. It's very interesting. Do you think like it's influenced your CrossFit career because you have a lots of coordination and like flexibility and stretching? Like, how do you think it influences CrossFit? Being a dancer?
Yeah. It's having coordination. I mean, you think of all of our Olympic lifts, there's so much going on in those lifts that you need to be able to quite literally control your body while something quite quick is happening and you're controlling an external load. So being coordinated and having good self-awareness. I mean, as a dancer, you just understand how your body moves really well. And then the flexibility, like you mentioned, for sure. Flexibility, balance, coordination, agility, a lot of those things come through dance. And then the other piece that has complemented my competitive career has been performing. So being a dancer, you tend to perform on stage. So I'm pretty comfortable being in front of people, and I often perform my best when I'm in front of people. That's when I feel really good. So I did a lot of performing arts within the dance kind of phase of my life. And so that translated really well to competing.
This is like the huge point, like performing in front of the people. I know a lot of athletes. I don't know what's happening in your country, but here we don't have a lot of competitions. So usually competing in front of a lot of people, it's stressful, it's frightening, and I think this is one of the reasons most people don't want to compete. Like I hear a lot of sportsmen, like athletes, they don't want to compete.
100%.
Yeah, this is a huge advantage.
Yeah, it's a skill. It's a skill, right? Just like we learn how to get fit, it's like learning how to do it in front of people. It's hard.
So let's talk about your competitive career. Been to the games, like the biggest ever competition of CrossFit. How was it? What have you felt?
What's really funny is I was at the games the year before I competed, but I was judging. So in 2014, I was on the floor judging for some of the events, and then some of the other events I was behind the scenes under the stadium, helping coordinate people who were volunteering and judging and doing stuff out on the floor. So I was there, but I was on the sidelines, just kind of watching in awe. And what was really nice is that the next year when I was competing, I had a really good appreciation for everything that goes into putting on this event. And it's cool because the people that run the CrossFit Games are the same people that have been running the CrossFit Games since it was at the ranch, since it really first began. It's just such a community-driven event. And I don't think a lot of people know that, because you see the televised version or the YouTube version, right? And it's like you see the documentaries from Buttery Bros and you're like, oh my God, this is huge and it's amazing. But it really is just being put on by a bunch of people who are incredibly resourceful, very good at what they do, and create an amazing event. And it's it really is a reflection of the community. So my experience judging was really awesome. And then going in as an athlete was far less stressful, to be honest, because when you're judging, it's a lot of pressure. And I think anyone who had to judge during the Open gets that. Like, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
So the athlete side of things, when you get to walk on the floor, do your thing, and then walk away and somebody else tidies up the mess, like, that's not a bad experience. It's kind of nice. And it's always very cool. I've always competed teams. So I did team in 2015, and then I did team again in 2019, 2 different teams. And doing the team experience is great. Like, you're with a bunch of people that you're out on the floor with people, and you get to throw down together. So there's something really fun about doing the team version.
So as an athlete, do you prefer, I don't know, it's a matter of preferences or not, but do you prefer more like being an individual athlete or a team athlete?
I think now I prefer individual, only because I've done a lot of team stuff. So I think I've not necessarily exhausted my experience, but doing team for such a long time, I feel like I've had my journey with doing that version of competing, and now I'm far more challenged by doing it individually. Whereas I think if you spoke to someone who's been doing individual competitions for a long time, they would probably be more challenged by doing team, because it's just a very different dynamic. There's communication that's involved. There's strategy that's totally different. There's elements that are well outside of your control that are just unlike anything you will ever experience in individual, because things like synchronized movements and different types of equipment and just things that you cannot test individually are tested on the teams. So it's just a different feeling. In terms of performance-wise, I think a lot of people would say, well, I prefer one or the other based on how well they train or how well they push. And for me, I know that I push really well when I'm doing it for other people. So it's like when other people are relying on me and it's a team effort, like, I will kill myself to help the team.
Yeah, because
when it comes
ability.
Yeah, you've got someone who's relying on you, right? It's like, it's just a totally different feeling and sense of accountability, I guess. Whereas for individual, you have to find that motivation intrinsically. It has to be an internal motivator to kill yourself. Whereas on the team, it's an external motivator. It's extrinsic, and I can do it for someone else, and that feels really easy. Doing it for selfish reasons is quite a different experience, and not selfish as a negative. It's just that you're competing for yourself, and you have to fight with yourself, not with anybody else. So it's a different experience.
For sure. But from the other side, I was that teammate that, like, I was stuck I think it was in 2017 or 2018 regionals event with handstand push-ups, strict handstand push-ups. And I was stuck in handstand push-ups, and my team couldn't go further. So I just felt this kind of like the huge responsibility, but from the other side, I was disappointed that I'm disappointing my team. So I don't know, like, it's really great. I think I feel like I'm also pushing more when going teams, because I'm doing for another people and for my team members. And as you say, the motivation is actually, it's very extrinsic. Like, I can go harder and longer, and I will never stop. But yeah, I felt also the other side of failing the team.
Yeah, it's hard. I've been in that position.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Like, now we have a really like a heavy period with the Open and the quarterfinals and the semifinals. How is your training looks like now? How many hours a day do you train? What special things do you do? How are you getting prepared for the quarterfinals now for teams after like 2 weeks of quarterfinals for individuals? What do you feel?
The last 2 weeks for me have been essentially a deload, really. Leading up to individual quarterfinals, I was training 5 sessions a week that were roughly 2 hours. My training is often the workout before I do my lifting, just because my lifting is my strength. So I need to really apply intensity to my workout instead. So I prioritize that. And then I would also do roughly 2 to 3, usually just two, just extra aerobic sessions during the week. So I don't do a lot of double days. I don't believe in doing a lot of volume. I just can't recover from it. Plus, I have other responsibilities in my life, so it's not realistic for me. So yeah, that was kind of leading up to quarterfinals. And then individual quarterfinals, I rest 2 days before any competition, a multi-day competition, that is. I'll always rest 2 days. I always feel my best with a full 2 days off. And then after quarterfinals, I took 1 day off. The final day of quarterfinals was quite nice because it was only one event. We did 2 events the first day, 2 events the second day, and then the last day was just one. So I didn't feel too beat up by that point, and I didn't redo any of the workouts. So I kind of like physically felt okay. And what was nice is after quarterfinals was open, I was sleeping really well. I didn't sleep that well in the lead up to it. I was too like nervous and excited. So when I started to catch up on sleep, I felt fine. So I got into training after a day rest. But what my training looked like was 30 minutes max of usually just a conditioning piece. I didn't do a lot of weightlifting. I just kind of go in, get something sweaty, and then leave. So that was really what training looked like. I trained, I think most days and then I've taken 2 days off this week before starting the team quarterfinals. So yeah, my training has been pretty dialed back and pretty simple and straightforward, nothing too crazy. I think, within the 2 weeks between individual quarterfinals and team quarterfinals, I'm probably not going to get any fitter. A lot of the training and intensity at that point is just to keep your confidence high. I think a lot of people, if they haven't trained, feel worried and anxious about it. So it's often just actually your training to just maintain high confidence before you get into a competition, but physiologically you're not necessarily getting fitter. So yeah, my training is dialed back. I just get some intensity and then I recover and try to feel as good as I can for the next stage.
Oh, so first of all, good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.
Smash it. I hope you guys.
Yeah.
Like two points from what you said, like it's very interesting. What is your programming? Are you doing the CFK program or are you doing some other programming?
So my programming is dictated by who I'm training with. I basically train my best when I'm with other people. So I started training with a female athlete at Steel Coast CrossFit, which is where I live, and their gym, and she was on Star Strength, which is an Aussie local coach who's actually based a couple hours away from here. And so I kind of just jumped into their program so that I could train with her, and I've stuck with it. And what's nice is he's become my coach. So I chat to him once, maybe twice a month, and I get notes from him and I message him as needed. So I believe in getting intensity by creating a good environment. And then I believe in good programming, but I also know that CrossFit is just CrossFit. The programming is not necessarily the most special element. I think you need to have a good environment and then also a good mentor, like a good coach. So that's kind of what I've set up. And with CFK programming, it's the same thing. Like I like people to do CFK programming in groups and to be able to use me and Henry, the other coach who works with me, as their mentor, so they can have a resource to get coaching feedback from and to hit up and ask questions and to be supported during, competitions or whatever it may be. So that's kind of the same rules I live by. I want a good environment and I want a good coach.
Wow, this is so important. Like we have a lot of online programming now here in Israel and also from the other countries from abroad. And people like always asking, what is the best? What shall I choose? What am I going to do? Which program like most suitable for me? Getting online personal coaching. So I really understood in the last year that training with good people and good environment and having fun during training, those are the things that keep me going. So while I'm consistent, I'm going further forward and I'm getting better. And if there is something important that the program will let me like preserve the consistency, something that is fun, something that is sustainable. And I may do it like it doesn't take me like 4 hours a day and 3 sessions a day, and I will must quit my job in order to train. So like I very, very agree with you.
Yeah, it's major. And I think people overlook that. I think people assume that it must be the programming. But if you think of all the CrossFit Games athletes that are competing, there's 30, maybe 40 different programs being represented. So therefore, it's not the program, it's the environment. And I think what's funny is, you see things like Mayhem or Proven or Comp Train. And I think the allure with them is that it's producing a good athlete. But what happens is actually competitive athletes are grouping up to do the program. So you're getting better because you're seeing what other people are doing on that program. And so it helps you raise your game. It's the same thing that we do during the Open. It's like, I see other people's scores. I want to do better. I want to compete with them. So you've really created a good environment. It's not necessarily the programming. I'm yet to see a CrossFit program that is totally different, that is totally unique, that is like blowing my mind, and is something that I haven't seen that's producing top athletes. Most CrossFit programs are CrossFit, and they're constantly varied function movements at high intensity with a lot of competition elements put in there. And that's your program. It's a very simple formula, really, at the heart of it. And yes, it can be made more scientific, but I think for majority of people, they need to get an appropriate dose of volume, a whole lot of intensity, and like you said, be able to enjoy it to build consistency.
Yeah. Like enjoying is the main part, I think. For me now, maybe it's my
Hell yeah. It's like, I've been doing CrossFit for over 10 years, and that's what we all should be aiming to do for the rest of our lives. So you better enjoy it. You better have fun with it. Like, do the stuff that you like. And it doesn't mean that you cherry pick. It means, be around people that you enjoy training with and be in a good environment.
Yeah, and that leads me for another point, like missing the workout, getting stressed about missing the workout. Will you please like say a couple of words about it? Like I see like my athletes, they getting stressed out and try to do the workout they missed in the other day of the week, or do the elements of the workout that they missed in the other training of that week. And I'm really trying to explain that it's okay not to train for a couple of days. It's okay to switch the Metcon for something that the group class is doing now because it's fun and nothing happened. It's great.
I miss workouts at least once a week. I am the it's like the reality is some days I can't get into the gym, so I'll go to the class instead. That's better than doing nothing. Some days I look at the workout and it's simply not something I need to do, either because I've got a niggle, an injury, or it's a strength and I need to work on a weakness instead. So I'll do something totally different. So I think, again, people get caught up on the little things rather than looking at the big picture. And, in terms of missing a session, it's like, it's one session in the 3 to 5 years that you will have to compete if you want to be competitive. One session is not the thing that makes the difference. And same thing in terms of like being sick or having an injury. The good news is that in terms of like your biology, not training or at least reducing your training down for a period doesn't have a major impact. There's some stat, it's like you build fitness with a lot of volume and a lot of stress and a lot of work, but you maintain fitness with like something like 7 times less. So it's like I can potentially, and this number might be thrown out wrong, but it's like I could train 7 times less volume and maintain my fitness. So I think, for people that through COVID stopped training, a lot of us kind of just maintained our fitness. Maybe our strength dropped a little bit, but like hopefully what it proved to a lot of us during lockdowns is you don't actually need that much to maintain. So for most of us that have freaked out about missing a session or getting sick or getting injured, it's like the worst you're going to do is probably just maintain so you can relax and then just worry about, what happens after you've recovered from your injury or after you've gotten healthy after being sick or having a flu or whatever. So I think it's like, hey, remember the big picture that across your lifetime, this is nothing. And also in terms of your fitness and strength, you'll probably maintain before you lose, unless you are bedridden for months, unless you're literally like in a hospital in bed for like 4 weeks, you will maintain and you will be okay.
Yeah, that's the word. I hope a lot of people will hear it and will understand it, because The mental thing is very, very important, and being stressed about missing the workout, it's like deloads the average like feeling about the process. Like I'm feeling more disappointed and stressed, then I'm feeling more happy and encouraged and motivated. So this is really important point. um, Another thing that it's, I think, like you said, you're choosing what to do. You know what to do for yourself because you're a coach, you have really a great experience. um, what are like the tips for the, for example, 2 3 years in CrossFit athletes that doing programming and trying to do it like by the books? When do you think it's possible to switch? When do you think it's okay to think that maybe this thing it is not good for me, I must do something else? Like how can we as a coaches build also responsible and thinkful athlete that may choose things to do or not to do because that may hurt them? I also hear like, oh yeah, I did this thing, my shoulder hurt, but it's written, so I did it. Like I
Yeah.
certain things like
I think, scaling and modifying workouts is a really important part of the program and a part of like just your longevity. So I think, if you have got niggles or pain points or like some shoulder pain or knee pain or whatever the pain is, the guidance always is pain is your guide. So don't go and do things that cause pain. And especially when you start to identify movements that may not be painful during the movement, but the next day you're sore from it.
yeah.
For me, what I do is I start collecting essentially the list of the movements that cause the pain, and I'll avoid them until I've addressed the pain, or I'll find other ways to do it. So for example, with shoulders, it's like, okay, well, for a little while in the lead up to the open, muscle ups and push ups were a little bit sore on the front of one of my shoulders. So I was like, okay, well, I just won't do muscle ups and push ups. I'll find other ways to do pressing movements. So for example, a light bench press was fine. Handstand push ups was fine. So I could find other ways to press and not be worried about my upper body pressing strength. So there are ways to work around it. CrossFit is infinitely scalable, which is really cool. Obviously, I'm a coach and I kind of know how to modify that. For people that aren't coaches, that is when you have to ask your coach for assistance. Like that's when you need to ask for help and reach out. And, screw whatever the RX is, whatever the leader, like the whiteboard says. It's just like, why would you risk hurting yourself and possibly meaning you cannot train at all for one workout? Like to put yourself on the bench and out of training for like 2 or 3 weeks recovering from a serious injury instead of just missing a couple of sessions while you're overcoming and managing a very minor injury. I know which one I would prefer. I would prefer to spend a few sessions modifying and scaling than to potentially risk injuring myself further and be out of the game completely. So in terms of like when you've got injuries or little pains that are coming up, it's like the earlier you can nip them in the bud, the better it is for the long term. So ignoring it will only make you pay a price later on. And that's not to say that you don't train. You still train, you just train around them, and pain is your guide, and you don't do the things that cause you pain. It's really simple. So you do lower body movements, or you use the good arm, or you do a different movement like sit-ups instead of toes to bar. It's like you just adjust and modify, and there's nothing bad about it. In fact, you're being smart, and the smartest athletes are the ones that know how to do that. So I think that's really important. And then you also mentioned like, how do we know when to change and adjust? And I think what you were kind of potentially leading to was, how do I know when to target a weakness or when to adjust my training or pick a different workout, right? And it's like, well, I think for wellness athletes, the best advice that I can give people is have consistent attendance over a long period of time, because the program, if it's just constantly varied functional movements, will expose you to the things you need to get better at if you're showing up regularly. Like that's as simple as it needs to be for most athletes. They just need the consistency in getting to the gym over a long period of time, and they will be exposed to all the things that they need to improve. When you are dealing with a more competitive athlete, someone who's going to quarterfinals, someone who's trying to get to semifinals, and they're in that sort of top 10 to 5%, that's when you might need to start targeting weaknesses. And the way that you identify them, usually people know what their weaknesses are. It's like, well, I can do really heavy workouts. I can go for a short period of time really hard. My 500-meter row time trial is the best in the gym, but I really don't like long distance running. And it's like, okay, cool. Well, I know what your weakness is. You have no aerobic capacity. You need to do long stuff more regularly. And then the same athlete, a different athlete might say, oh, well, I love doing the long running and I love cardio. Anything that's got burpees in it and pull-ups, I love it. Give me a light barbell or light dumbbells and like handstand push-ups and I'll be like in heaven. That's the athlete that probably needs to spend more time weightlifting and doing the more high power stuff to get potentially stronger, depending on whether that's a weakness or not. So I think the assessment of what I need to target in terms of how do I pick stuff becomes clear. At the same time, we've already said it, training should still be fun. And I think if you continue to only drill your weaknesses, training can become a little bit of a push and it can become a little bit of not punishment, but it can feel like you're just like trying to get better and better at the stuff that you suck at. And it can get really hard and you shouldn't always be doing that. It should just be something that you target alongside of your normal programming. So make sure you still do things that you enjoy. Like just make sure it's an enjoyable process. And I always say to anyone who's coming back from a break from training, cherry pick the workouts you like just to get back into it. You don't have to do the stuff that you don't like, that you're not good at. Do stuff that you like, that you're good at, and just enjoy training again. And then you can kind of broaden your horizons and do the stuff that you know you need to work on.
Yeah, for sure. Sure. And like training with the small pains, I can see it's like it's going. It's okay. Like I have a right arm injury, so I will use my left arm, or I will not do it. What about like more serious injuries? And we have the question from the people here, like when I ask, what do you want to ask Kate? So one of the questions was about your back injury and how does this affect your training process? How did you manage? What decisions did you take? How did you manage to continue training and competing afterwards? Like
backs are funny. Like spines and bones and our skeletons degenerate. Like they just do. Like that's kind of what happens over time. So I think, they say something like 70% of people could go and get a MRI and there'd be some herniated disc or some disc degeneration in their spine. So it's not unusual for things like CrossFit combined with, lifestyle factors to play a role. So when I say lifestyle factors, specifically mine, I'd been doing a lot of traveling at the time. Working for CrossFit, I was doing seminars in Asia. So I was doing a lot of like 8 to 10 hour flights, sitting a lot and then walking a lot and then sleeping in beds that weren't my own and just kind of being all out of whack. And even things like cabin pressure and having different diets and just stuff like that, it all is stress on your system and you're in positions that aren't necessarily ideal. And then on top of that, I was competing in weightlifting. So I first aggravated my back after the 2015 games. Would compete a team and I'd been doing all this travel and then was back squatting. It was probably 60% of my 1 rep max. So it wasn't particularly heavy. And I just remember standing up a squat and was like, something was off. That didn't feel very good. And then I was kind of locked in position. I couldn't rotate very well. I couldn't bend forward. It was just like there was something wrong and it was painful and I didn't want to, it felt unstable. It felt like I didn't want to pick up any weights. So when that happened, I assumed like something had been aggravated. I didn't know what it was. I didn't get a scan or anything. I'd seen someone to treat it. I immediately went to a physio. And they basically gave me some deep tissue work and then sent me back on my way and were like, hey, rest for 6 weeks and then get back into it, which I did. And then in 6 weeks, I started building back up again, built up my weights, built up everything and thought I was being pretty good, but didn't change anything about my movement because I didn't think maybe my positions and my technique is what's caused it alongside of, this lifestyle where I was doing a lot of sitting. So I redid my back. I did it about 2 or 3 months later. And then I did the whole process again. So I did the whole process of like rest for 6 weeks and then get back into it. And then I did my back again and then I rested and I was like, I need to do something different this time. And so what I realized was I needed to fix my position that was potentially the cause of me loading up incorrectly through my spine when I was weightlifting or doing gymnastics. So I spent a lot of time doing unilateral work. So things like pistols, we don't do them heaps in CrossFit, but the hugely beneficial because all of our movements is bilateral, meaning we use 2 feet for squatting, we use 2 feet for deadlifting, we use 2 feet when we press. So we don't spend a lot of time balancing and learning to stabilize on one side at a time, meaning it's very, very easy to compensate. So if I have a weak side, my strong side will just do the work for me. And oftentimes that means that the strong side will be overworked, or you might injure the weak side because it's not very strong. So it can be either way. So I spend a lot of time doing things like pistols, lunges, box step-ups, sumo, single leg Romanian deadlift, single leg good mornings, just anything that was one-sided, because I wanted to train both sides evenly rather than creating an opportunity to compensate. So I did a lot of that. And then I built some more flexibility in my squat. And that really consisted of every day I just sit in an air squat, and it was a passive squat. So I just stretch, and I built up to a 10-minute air squat, and it just opened up my hips. It lengthened my hamstrings. My hip flexors became stronger. Even things like my thoracic became better at extending because you have to hold yourself, and my shins became stronger, and I improved my ankle mobility because you have to hold yourself in position with your knee forward over your toe. So it was quite interesting having all these things happen. And then the third part was I improved my gymnastics and core strength. So I was pretty mobile from being a dancer, and I would really hyperextend a lot, and a lot of my kipping, I would hyperextend in my deadlift setup. I was just a hyperextending person. So I learned how to find neutral, which was totally foreign. Didn't know how to find neutral until I retrained, and it just required me to do a lot of strict movements, a lot of very controlled stuff, very slow stuff, and then slowly I would increase the speed or increase the intensity or increase the weights. So it was really a combination of giving my body time to rest, and then also building a new, different kind of strength that I just needed to overcome any imbalances that I had, and then address any poor positions that I had. So that was kind of the journey. I got back to competing within a year, and that was 2016. And I was competing at just a local competition, which is now Torian Pro, funnily enough, which is our semifinals, but this was prior to it being semifinals. And then 2 years later, I was at the games again. So kind of got back to being healthy, and then got back to being competitive, and then became my fittest 3 years after hurting my back. So in 2019, the year that I went to the games on a team, I finished 16th in my region in the open, and that was the best open finish I had. So that was a really good open. And then funnily enough, I hurt my back again mysteriously just in middle of last year. So August, September, October last year, I wasn't lifting weights. I don't know what happened. It was a bit of a out of the blue, like acute injury. I think it was something similar. I was deadlifting, my back got a bit aggravated. I thought it was okay, but I came back to the weights about a month later, and I felt like it was off again. So I just laid off the weights. Did I get it? I can't remember if I got a scan or not. I don't think I got a scan. When I first did it, I eventually got a scan, but it just showed general degeneration and general aging of the joints. So I don't think I got a scan this time. I just basically went through the same process of just do some more balance stuff, do some more unilateral work, retrain my core. I did a lot of strict gymnastics. I just went back to what I knew was okay. It wasn't going to hurt me, it wasn't going to cause pain, and it was going to balance out any imbalances. And then that combined with, I have a sports doctor who was talking about issues with my SIJ becoming tight and becoming rigid and not moving very well. So a lot of my pain is very, very low in my back on my right side. So it's on a side, and it's like almost behind my butt. So it's getting into the pelvis. So that's your sacroiliac joint. And so he was talking about there's a lot of issues kind of going on there, and there's some tightness. So I was doing a lot of work on just glute strengths and glute med exercises. And then that in conjunction with, he prescribed me a particular anti-inflammatory that's pretty strong anti-inflammatory. I took one after my back had been aggravated again at the end of this sort of 3-month window. I was really upset because I'd finally gone back to getting closer to 70% of my weights, 80% of my weights. And then it flared up again. And I was like, really? Called my doctor. He prescribed me these anti-inflammatories, which I don't typically lean towards because I just don't take a lot of medication in general. And I sort of said, okay, cool. I'm just going to do it because it's kind of getting to this point where you start getting to the last resort. And 2 days later, I was 100%, like quite literally had no pain, had full range of motion, felt really good. So I think 3 months of backing off, of being really smart, rebuilding my strength, being patient as hell, not aggravating it again. Like I had a really good period of time where I hadn't re-aggravated it. And then when I did re-aggravate it, I was just at the back end of recovering. So it was like I was almost there. This anti-inflammatory just knocked off any inflammation that had been flared up in the joint or flared up in my body. And I kind of just turned a corner like that. So that was a sort of quite different experience the first time. But I'll never knock any medicated kind of paths to recovering from injury, because I think it is important that you are seeing people like physios and chiros and sports doctors who will potentially prescribe some kind of stronger medication that you can't just get over the counter. You know, it's a prescription only medication. So that really helped me. And I think I've only ever taken like one pill of this. It's meloxicam. So it's like something like 15 milligrams or 5 milligrams. You know, it's a really small amount. And I just had this really good turning point happen at that time. So yeah, I think it can be acute, it can be a chronic, but the pathway for recovery for me was fairly similar for both.
Yeah. So it's like important things like getting back to basics, working your strength, working your flexibility, getting rest, getting help from the professionals. I think it's very important because I see a lot of athletes going through injuries and keep going, just injure themselves more and then stop training or getting out of training. Or we should also think about like our future lives. One day we will be old, so we want to be healthy. Like I want to build a healthy community, and competing now, it's okay, but like putting everything on the scale in order to compete, including your health, it doesn't worth it. So it's thank you very much for sharing. And it's also one point, like you're back competing, so it's
I feel I'm like the healthiest, strongest I've ever been, almost. Like it's been, and I think that's the thing with quarterfinals. I felt not super happy about not qualifying for semifinals, but it was a 12-week training program because I just come off the back of my back injury and was like, okay, I've got 12 weeks till quarterfinals, let's go. And then I finished 47th. So, you know, I have to be happy with that based on where I'd come from. And yeah, I think, you know, what you said about the people that train through an injury and then have to stop training altogether. I always tell my clients 2 weeks. You have a 2-week period for your injury to get better and go away, or you go and seek help. So you got 2 weeks to train around it a little bit, see if you can figure it out, see if it gets better. If it doesn't get better, now it's time to get treatment.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. It's really, really important. And I think it will be very, very useful. And I hope a lot of people understand that. Like
everybody listen, okay? Listen to us.
Listen to us. We have like some more questions. I will pick like the most interesting one, because you have a lot of spheres. Like you're also a nutrition coach and a programming coach, and also an athlete, and also like open relationship thing. I must pick something. We have questions about nutrition, and I use your videos a lot because I'm not a nutrition coach. I don't understand a lot, but I understand that this is very important to support the athletes. And I use a lot of your videos sending to my athletes to help them understand it's important to eat and how we should like do all this food thing. So what like one question we have is about measuring calories and counting calories. But what people like your approach is the calorie based, like a calorie counting based. There are people that overcoming maybe some food disorders that counting calories is stressful for them. It make them feel like bad, and they make them feel that they build their day around the food, like thinking when I'm eating, what I'm eating, how many things I'm eating, is it enough or not enough? Do you have maybe any advice for those who can't count or can't feel bad with counting calories? What can we do? What these people may do?
Yeah. And, you know, whenever it comes to nutrition, the answer is often like, it depends on the person. Like, that really is one of the things that's tricky about nutrition, because it depends on, well, what have they done before, and what was their experience like with that, and what's their psychology around food, and how do they react to stress, and, you know, what's their relationship like with their body, and all of these different things play into their tolerance for using different diets. And so that's where things like tracking calories, or tracking your 3 different macros, protein, carbs, and fat, or using, you know, something like MyFitnessPal, or even doing things like a meal plan, or we have like guides for eating, or doing something like fasting, or any diet that has any set of rules. Really, they're all just different tools. And, you know, whether the goal is to just be healthier, or to lose weight, or to improve performance, you sort of need to establish that first. But there are many different ways to accomplish these goals, and tracking is just one of them. For some people, it's incredibly beneficial. For others, it can be detrimental to their mental health, or just their general ability to like focus on being healthy and not worried about being skinny or obsessed with numbers. What I've found is that for a lot of us who have spent a lot of time tracking, especially if you've been doing protein, carbs, and fat, and focusing on really specific targets, what I like to do with those people is spend time not tracking and just kind of building intuitive eating skills, which, you know, my premise or my belief is that you shouldn't be dieting year round. You should be spending phases of the year dieting when it's needed. And that could be just to have a look at what you're eating, to just, you know, you might track without any targets and just see, how much protein am I eating? Am I getting enough? And how many total calories am I eating? Is it enough to support my energy levels and to support my hormones and to make me feel good in training? So it could be something like that, or it could be for a more specific purpose like weight loss. So you might bring in tracking for a 6 to 10-week window to just try to lean up a little bit. But then outside of that, you would step away from it. And I think that part of the reaction to tracking is often actually that you're just fatigued, that you've been doing it for so long and you've become so hung up on it that you actually need a break. And then what we do is, after people have taken a break and learned to just relax about food and not worry and not be stressed about trying to be skinny or trying to look a certain way, when people can get to that stage, when they're comfortable eating enough and they're comfortable with training and they're feeling physically good, that's the point that we're kind of ready to potentially diet. And what we would do is, rather than going, okay, here are your 3 targets, I want you to go and hit this number, this number, this number every single day. We begin by just tracking with no targets. So you just track to see how much you're currently eating. Like, what are you currently doing? Don't need to change anything. Don't need to add anything. Don't need to cut anything out. Just see what you're currently doing. Look at the data according to what you are simply putting in your body today, rather than trying to adjust big things immediately. And then from there, after a phase of doing that, we might simply use your total calories. So especially when it comes to weight loss, carbs and fat, there's really no benefit to doing more of one or more of the other. It's not like eating high fat, low carbs is better than eating high carbs, low fat for weight loss. It's such a minuscule difference that it doesn't matter. So we would just look at total calories. And then, because we want to support muscle mass, we want to be able to get stronger and maintain muscle throughout our life, especially as women, especially as we age. It is one of the most important macronutrients for us. We have to be eating enough protein. So what we would give people is calories and protein targets, and that's it. And we would just hang out there for a while. In some cases, maybe it's just protein. And so we really try to just simplify the whole thing down. Tracking is, I still believe it's a useful tool, even though for some people it's like, you know what, we should take a break from it. Definitely don't do a lot of it. We should step out from it and then step back into it. It's still super beneficial to make it simplified, especially once you've got the hang of it. It can be a bit of a learning process, but once you've got the hang of it, it makes it objective. It's just data. You're looking at numbers, and there are apps now that make tracking so simple. For me, I've been tracking for maybe about 5 months now, which is pretty long for me. I haven't been trying to lose weight the whole time, but I've been just tracking. I spent the first 3 months tracking without any targets. I was just tracking, just for the sake of tracking, just to get back into the routine of it, just to refine my tracking skills and just get used to it and create the habit. I didn't have any targets. I just let myself eat what I wanted to eat to feel good. And then I started to bring targets in for the last 2 months. So I spent a long time just tracking for no real reason, just to track. And so it just became like this daily thing where I would just enter how much food I'd had for that day. And it brings some accountability as well, which is nice. So yeah, I think for some people, tracking is not the right thing for right now. Doesn't mean that it's not necessarily never going to be the right thing. And then for other people, it's a really beneficial thing. So it's not that tracking is wrong. It just depends on who it is and the context.
So with your nutrition programming, your online coaches, I just try to understand, because one of the things I personally learned from you, that food is the fuel, and I like my body and how I look. It's of course influenced by what I eat, but I really understand the separation of two things, and it's okay for me to track, and it's okay for me to gain a couple of kilos and then to lose a couple of kilos, because I'm like playing with it. It's okay, but there are a lot of people that can't do this, because once they go up 1 or 2 kilo, they are stressed, like it's mental. It's really really heavy on them. So maybe you may tell us a little bit about your nutrition coaching. Like, what are your coaches doing? Are they flexible? Are they in touch with the participants, like weekly basis, daily basis? Are you capable to help those struggling with body image and food? And is this only the nutrition program, or it's also nutrition coaching, like coaching people to separate like the food from the body image, to understand the food is fuel, food is good, I am responsible for what I eat, I can change it? Do you have such a tools, and are you giving these tools for people?
Yeah. So one of the things that's super important to me when it comes to coaching people with nutrition is that they have someone supporting them. Like it's first and foremost support, and secondly, kind of accountability. And then third, it's information and education. So we drive compliance through education. So we can teach women about their hormones. We can teach men about their hormones. We can teach them what foods fuel training, specifically when it comes to stuff like CrossFit style training. We can help them understand what's going to benefit them over the long term in terms of their, like we said before, like maintaining muscle for a long period of time. That's one of the best things to establish a high quality of life when we're older. So there's all these things that are really important to us. And what's at the heart of that is that you're working with someone personally. So the coaching is not an impersonal service. It's not like you just get given macros and you just go away and track them. It's someone that you chat to every week. So you're constantly talking to them. You can talk to your coach outside of your check-in days as well. We offer some eating guides in terms of like, meal plan type things, but we don't write and tell you exactly what to eat, because it's very much a learning process. And so you come to us with this idea of like, I'm just open to trying stuff and figuring it out. And when challenges come up, I've got someone to talk to. I think what you described then, when people have like, they weigh themselves and they freak out and they gain weight and it's really horrible and it's a really big struggle. A lot of that stuff happens in private. And we don't talk to anyone about it, right? Like we can all talk about it as a group. We understand it's going on, but when we're really suffering, it's happening silently. We're not telling anyone, we're not talking about it. We feel we are just becoming worthless. We're becoming inadequate. We aren't worthy of love. We're not very good at accepting ourselves, let alone thinking that anybody else could accept us. And it's all happening like inside of our heads. And I think that is part of the struggle of it. And so when you have a coach, we are going to try and coax some of that out of you, because we want you to be able to talk about that and have someone to say, hey, absolutely not. That's not the truth. What you think is the reality is incorrect. That's just your subjective version of what you think your value or your worth is. And it's not right. And you are worth so much more than that. And here's what's important. And here's what I want you to focus on moving forward. And they're going to give you steps to take and just give you someone to kind of be like a support buddy, someone that's going to slap you around a little bit and be like, hey, like get it together. It's okay. It's going to be all right. And also give you a good hefty dosing of reality. Like hey, like your value and your worth is not determined by the way that you look at all. And anyone who thinks that is not someone that's worth having around. Like anyone who thinks that has got values that are different to yours. Like we need to value people for more than the way that they look or a number on a scale. So it's really important that we have people that we can actually kind of work through some of that with. And that ultimately ends up, as a nutrition coach and for my other coaches, that kind of ends up being a big part of our job. We are there as your confidant, your friend, I won't say therapist because we're not therapists, but we wear that hat to a degree, and we're there to just listen and to just hear it out. And when you go through the process of sharing the stuff that's happening internally, it helps you get it out. it helps you hear yourself. And when you hear it, you're suddenly often realizing what you're saying to yourself, the thoughts in your head, what's going on in there. And you can often find ways to either create different thoughts or change the thoughts, or just reassess them and ask yourself, is that the way I want to talk to myself? Is that what I think is important? And so I think for a lot of people that work with us, the end of their journey is not always, a classic like, oh, here's my before and my after photo and look at me in a bikini. It's actually not that. A lot of our clients are like, I've never felt so happy with my body. Like, that's it. It's like, I learned a little bit about how to eat, and I have changed my eating habits and my meal prep strategy, and I have a better bedtime routine, and I feel really good in the gym, and I'm also stronger, like, all these little things. But some of the biggest things for people is like, I'm so much nicer to myself. Like, I've just learned how to be kinder to myself. That person in the mirror, I'm not, critiquing every little flaw that they have. I'm able to see my whole self, my big picture, and I can take in all of it, and I can find things I actually like about myself for the first time ever. And that is something that we are super invested in. So, I think that's been a really big part of my journey, learning to accept my body and become a little bit more body neutral and body positive. And so that's kind of inherently built into the program. It's like you've said, it's like people come to us with that struggle about their weight, and they think it's about the food, but it's often about their relationship to themselves.
Like, every word is like, thank you. I have no words. I think it will be so helpful for a lot of people, and it's the way we talk to ourselves, and the way we see ourselves, and it's the way like we want to feel good with ourselves. But sometimes this us that preventing us from feeling good, and
we have like an evil friend living inside our brain.
Yeah,
that we have to learn how to tell to shut up every now and again.
And how to talk nicely to yourself. This is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think that this part was just great, and it will be helpful, and I hope that a lot of people will see it and will use it. So thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. I love talking about it. It's just, like when some of that stuff starts to click and you start to see things changing, and you can just appreciate your body differently. And I think it happens for people with CrossFit. Like, doing CrossFit is one half of the journey, because you learn that your body can do stuff for you rather than just look a certain way. It's like your body is actually really capable of lifting heavy weights and going fast, and you can perform and you can train it to get better. And that's one half of the journey of learning to think about your body differently. And then the other half is that side part of thinking about food and your weight and stuff like that.
Yeah, of course. Okay. I saw your yesterday's reel about the failure. And I actually prepared one question. It's not my question, it's the question of Tim Ferriss, the Tribe of Mentors book. Like,
yeah,
is this the nice one? And the 10 questions he asks, I really love the questions, really love to read and to hear the answers of other people. So because of yesterday's reel, and because this was my question, so I want to ask, like, everything is a process. And during the process, sometimes we succeed and sometimes we fail, but everything is the part of the process, and it's okay and it's nice. And we need to embrace both the success and failure. Will you please share on one failure of yours that influenced your life, like one biggest failure that lead to a biggest success in the future?
I have a pretty good story, and it's not necessarily relevant to training or nutrition, although I have a lot of failures with that stuff. Even, some of the smallest little like failures or mess ups are some of the ones you learn the most from, right? But one of the big ones that really changed my life is I was fired as a coach from a gym in New Zealand in 2014. I was fired. I had a disagreement with the owner, and it kind of escalated and resulted in me being fired. But and you know, it was just awful. It was just such an horrible experience. It was I don't like confrontation. I don't like disagreeing with people. It was just horrible. And I was in my like early 20s, and it was it was bad. And I'd been working on seminar staff at the time and doing some work over at gyms in Australia. And what it ultimately led to was one of the guys that I'd been working for in Australia or working with said, "Hey, I need a coach. Like, do you want to come to Brisbane in Australia and be a coach for my gym?" And I'd just been fired. So I was like, okay, sure. I'll just move to Australia. Like, why not? And that was the gym that I competed at the games for the following year. So that was kind of this like interesting sidestep in my life that happened where I changed paths quite dramatically, but it put me on a better path. And I competed at the games. I ended up being in Brisbane with two incredible mentors that have totally changed my coaching skills, my coaching career, the way I think, the way I do everything, the way I run my business, the way I compete. One of the mentors I still work with, I go up to Noosa to train with them. His wife is my sports psychologist, like just these incredible connections that came out of this. And then from Brisbane, I ended up in Melbourne because of my mentor, training with Reebok CrossFit Frankston, and going to the games again. So all these connections had come out of me moving to Australia, which wouldn't have happened if I wasn't fired. So that was one of my biggest failures, and one of the things that has made me most successful.
The interesting fact that you are talking about it and you are smiling and you are
Yeah.
laughing. And I really want to embrace this moment, like what sometimes we think is the biggest failure of ours. Usually after a couple of years or after 10 years, we will smile and laugh about it, and probably we will find ourselves in a better place. So
Absolutely.
thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a fun story because I think, like, you know, when you get fired, you're like, oh, I really suck. Like, oh, this is bad. Like, my world is over. And I was just like, all of my worst fears about myself and my ability as a coach had been confirmed. You know, it was like everything I was worried about was on the spot confirmed that I wasn't good enough. And I just remember being like, it was just the worst feeling. And then, you know, 2, 3, 4 years later, it was like, oh, thank God, thank goodness. All the great people I know now have all at some point been fired.
For sure. So thank you very much. It was so nice, and like I was so happy and so excited to talk to you. And this is a great opportunity for me. So
yeah,
you.
It's been awesome. Thank you.
Shared a lot. And just to finish our interview, maybe we have one advice for women who train or just started training. Like one thing you want every woman in the world to know about her and her training process.
This is something that I wish every client of mine would spend time doing. And a lot of people are very resistant to it because of their insecurities or issues around body image. I wish that every woman in the world would spend at least 12 months eating and training to be as strong as they possibly can, rather than eating and training to look a certain way. Just 12 months. If you can do more, do more. But I asked for 12 months of eating enough food and training really hard to get strong rather than look a certain way. That's the one thing I wish every woman would do.
That's priceless. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Okay. I wish you a good day.
Thank you.
Lots of luck on the team quarterfinals. Do it to semifinals. Do it to the games.
You.
I'm really holding my thumb on the games.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for spending your time with us.
Of course. Thanks, Natalie.
Bye. Thank you. Sarah.
I'm ending the live, I guess.